Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, Economics Simplified with Miss Ellen. The purpose of this channel is to help students gain interest in economics, help them to understand economics, and also simplify economics for my students or my viewers. What I want you to do for me is you subscribe to the channel, you like, you share, and you make sure to leave the comments below. Today's topic of discussion is the theory of production. The theory of production. Our objectives of the day. We have the students will be able to define production, know how to explain the method of production, know the advantages and then disadvantages of the method of production, also know how to explain the time period in production. And finally, the students will be able to explain the short run production period in terms of the total product, the average product, and the marginal product. So let's begin. We start with the definition of production. The definition of production. We define production as the creation and then distribution of goods and services to satisfy human wants. Creation and then distribution of goods and services to satisfy human wants. So an example of production, we have farming, we have teaching, we have manufacturing, etc. Then we move to the method of production. Basically, we have two methods of production. We have that of the labor-intensive method of production, and we have the capital-intensive method of production. So these are the two methods of production. We take the first one, that is labor-intensive method of production. Now, the labor-intensive method of production is simply a method of production where the production process uses relatively large proportion of labor than capital in production. In other words, this is where we have the use of labor to produce goods and services, or the use of manpower to produce goods and services to satisfy human wants. Then we look at the advantages of labor-intensive method of production. The first one is it can be very economical in a labor-abundant society. For instance, a society where majority of their resources it's labor rather than capital, then it will be very wise of a producer to use or employ more labor in their production than that of capital. Then it is relatively cheaper in the short run as compared to the capital intensive method. We know that in the short run production theory, or in the short run, this is where we deal with production in terms of a smaller quantity. So it would be irrational or unwise of the producer to go for a capital intensive, but then you rather use that of the labor intensive, because you are producing under the short run where you are producing based on smaller scale. Then the third advantage is that it leads to a higher employment. So if you are using the labor intensive, it helps to reduce unemployment in the system. It does not suffer from harsh weather conditions. A typical example is that of our African society, where we have a harsh weather condition. Some of the machines cannot operate. So it will be very rational of the producer to use labor instead of using capital intensive. Let's look at that of the disadvantages of labor intensive method of production. The first disadvantage is that it may lead to slower process of production due to inefficiency on the part of the labor. You know, when you compare the use of machine to the use of human beings or the use of labor, of course, that of the labor will be slower than the use of capital or machine. then labor agitation for higher wages may lead to higher cost of production. This is where the labor is always asking for an increment in salary or wages. And then we know that wages are or a higher wages leads to a higher cost of production. And we know when your cost of production is high, the consequence that will cause your production. Then thirdly, there may be temptation to use unskilled labor when labor is abundant. So as you use labor or as labor help you to increase your production, as I said, you'll be tempted to even use unskilled labor, and then at the end of the day, it will bring about inefficiency in your production. Then we have it is subject to the law of diminishing marginal return. The use of labor is subjected to the law of diminishing marginal return. This is where when you employ more labor to work on a fixed factor, which is the land, eventually there will be whatever you are producing. In other words, your marginal productivity will diminish. Why? Because a variable factor, which is labor, is constantly working on the fixed factor. So your productivity or your efficiency or your marginal product will diminish due to the law of diminishing marginal returns. Now we move to that of the capital intensive method of production. That is the second method of production. Then with this is the method of production where the production process uses a relatively larger proportion of capital than labor in production. In other words, with a capital intensive method of production, this is where we have the use of heavy machines such as the bulldozer, the combine harvester in producing goods and services, either the rather than using the labor or the manpower to produce goods and services. Now we look at the advantages of using capital intensive. It is relatively cheaper in the long run. We are saying that when you use capital intensive, example, the use of machine in the long run, it is relatively cheaper. This is because in the long run, it is assumed that all factors have varied. In other words, you are producing on a larger scale. So it will be irrational for you, the producer, to use that of labor because it will be very expensive using labor in the long run than that of using capital in the long run. Then it favors large-scale production. We all know the use of capital, example, machine, helps you to increase your productivity. So if you want to produce on a larger scale, as I said, it will be very rational of you, the producer, to use capital intensive rather than using labor intensive. It is more efficient than labor-intensive method of production. Obviously, the use of machine, of course, it's very efficient as compared to the use of humans or labor. Then it makes use of highly skilled labor. If you are using capital example machine, you need someone who is very skillful, someone who is highly educated. You cannot use unskilled labor to operate a heavy machine. Then it is flexible and then adjustable to change. Machines, you can always change it to suit whatever you want to do. Unlike labor, if you want to change labor, it means the labor will have to be retrained or educated. So when you compare the two factors, that of the capital, it's, as I said, it's flexible and then very adjustable to change, or it can be changed as compared to labor. Now let's look at the advantages of the capital intensive method of production. The first is that it can lead to unemployment of labor since it is labor repetitive. So what we are saying is that in a community where we have more labor and then the producer is using capital, it will lead to the unemployment of labor, meaning labor will be underutilized or labor will be unemployed. And then we know the consequence of having a society where we have a larger unemployment rate. Then it creates balance of payments problem for developing countries. We know that the use of capital, example machines, most of the machines will have to be imported. So the more you are importing your machines or your input, then it brings about a problem known as what? The balance of payments or balance of payments deficit. Then it may be costly in the short run. As I said, in the short run, we are talking about production in a smaller quantity. So it will be very unwise or irrational for the producer to use capital intensive in the short run. So as I said, it is very costly. Then the machines may be suitable for a particular environment. Certain machines work in a particular environment and then others do not work at all due to let's say the weather condition or the climatic condition. But then humans, wherever you take us to, of course, we will be able to adjust to the system. Then there may be lack of qualified personnel to operate and then maintain the machines. If you are using the capital intensive or the machines, as you need skilled labor or you need a qualified personnel. So where you are lacking this personnel, then it wouldn't be advisable using the capital intensive method of production. Now we move on to time periods in production. Time periods in production. The first time period, we have the market period. Then we have the short round time period, the long round time period, and then lastly, we have the very long round time period. So in the theory of production, we are going to deal with the 4 types of time period. That is, as I said, the market period, the short round time period, the long round time period, and then the very long round time period. So we take them one after the other and then explain what they are. So let's look at that of the market period. Now it is the period of time in which supply is limited to the stock already on the market. What am I saying? We are talking about the market period. It is the period of time when your quantity supply it's limited, even if price is what increasing. Now we know from the law of supply that when price increases, obviously supply will also what increase. But then in the market period, it's a situation where your supply will be limited. That is, whatever you brought to the market, let's assume that you are a tomato seller. And then that particular day you brought, let's say, 10 baskets of tomatoes. You are limited to that 10 baskets. So in the course of you selling or in the market period, if price of the commodity increases and then whatever you are selling it's finished, you cannot tell your people to wait in the market for you to go back to the farm, do your cultivation, wait for whatever you cultivated to germinate that same day, do your harvesting and then bring back to the market in order to meet what the increase in price. No, you are limited to the stock you brought in the market. So we are saying that this is where the quantity supplied of whatever you are selling in the market, you are limited. Although there is a price increase in the market. So that is the market period. Then let's look at that of the short round time period. It is the period of time in which one factor of production, that is capital, is fixed whilst another varies. In other words, it is the time period in which at least a factor of production is fixed and then another it's varying. So in this situation, that is in the short round, you cannot increase output even if there is a change or an increase in demand. Why? Because it is the short round. You only have control over the variable factor. So if you want to increase output in the short round, then what you can do it's either you increase your raw material or you increase your labor force. In other words, the labor that you've employed will have to work for overtime. But then you have no control on the fixed factor. That is what? In the short run. Okay, so let's look at that of the long run. It is the period of time in which all the inputs, that is capital, labor, are variable except technology. So as I said, the period of time in which all our inputs, when we talk about the input, we are talking about what that of the capital and then the labor are varying or are variable except technology. So technology does not change in the long run. What changes are the inputs, or they are the capital and then the labor. So we move on to the last time period, which is the very long run. The very long run time. With this, it is the period of time when all inputs, including technology, are variable. So let's assume that if you are asked to, let's say, differentiate between the long run and then the very long run, that is, with the long run, all inputs are varying, excluding technology. But then with that of the very long run, all inputs are changing or all inputs are varying, including what? Technology. So that is the very long run. Now let's look at production concept in the short run. With the theory of production, we have two other theories under it. So we have the short run production theory, and then we have the long run production theory. So we first look at that of the short run production theory. Short run production theory. Now, with the short run production theory, we'll be looking at certain concepts such as the total product, the average product, and then that of the marginal product. Let's look at what is meant by total product. Now, the total product simply means the total output produced by combining or employing all the factors of production, or it is the physical product produced by all the inputs in a given period of time. For example, maybe at the end of the year, you were able to produce, let's say, 100 bags of cocoa. So that 100 bags of cocoa becomes what? Your total product or your total productivity. Now, let's look at the um, graphical representation of the total product. As you can see on your screen, the total product always varies. Total product always varies with output. So when output is 0, your total product is also 0. When output starts to increase, then the total product also what increases. Now we have two ways in which the total product increases. We have that of the total product increasing at an increasing rate. And then we have total product increasing at a decreasing rate. Then the total product attains a maximum, that is the highest total product. Then the total product begins to what? Fall. So sometimes you can be asked to give, let's say, characteristics of the total product. The first characteristic will be that total product increases at an increasing rate. When we say total product increases at an increasing rate, it means that the total product or the productivity is increasing very fast. So the steep slope you see here, that is the total product increasing at an increasing rate. Then it gets to a time when the total product will be increasing at a decreasing rate, meaning that it is increasing all right, but then the rate at which it's increasing slows down. Then we have this point where the total product attains a maximum point, that is the highest total product. Then the total product begins to fall. The total product falls, but then it never enters the negative zone. So this is the graphical representation of the total product. Now let's look at that of the mathematical representation of the total product. The total product, in as much as we can draw the total product can also be calculated. So we look at the formula for calculating the total product. If you are asked to calculate for the total product, it is simply the average product times your labor. So the AP represents the average product, and then the L is the labor. So that is the mathematical formula for calculating the total product. Average product times labor. Then let's move on to that of the average product. Average product. It is the total product per unit of the variable input. Now, when we say average, that is what half of total. So that is the average product. The total product per the unit of the variable input. Then we look at the graphical representation of the average product. The average product also behaves like that of the total product. It also what increases, attains a maximum, and then begins to fall. So that is the shape of the average product. Now the average product that cannot also enter the negative zone. Now, having seen the graphical representation, let's look at that of the mathematical representation of the average product. In other words, the formula used in calculating the average product. Remember, I said the average of something means half of what? The total. So the formula for calculating the average product is the total product over labor. So that is what we have on your screen. That is the TP over what? Labor. TP represents the total product. The L is the labor. So that is the formula for calculating the average product. Then we look at the last concept, which is marginal product. Now, marginal simply means addition to something. So the marginal product is the addition to total product as a result of employing an additional unit of a variable factor. I take it again. The marginal product is the addition to total product as a result of employing an additional unit of a variable factor, which is what? Labor. A typical example is, let's assume that your when you start production, your total product, it's, let's say, that is 100 units. Or let me use this way. You employ 5 people, and then the 5 people are able to give you a total product of, let's say, 100 units. Then you want to increase your production. So what you do is you employ an additional person, making what 6. Now the 6 people are also going to what add up to your productivity. So let's assume that if 5 people are giving you a productivity of say 100 units, then you employ an additional person, making what 6 people working for you. Now the 6 people are will also increase your production to, let's say, 150 units. So at the end of the day, your marginal product will be the initial total product, which is the 100, and then the new total product, which is 150. So meaning that your marginal product will be what? The 50. How did you get the 50? You got the 50 as a result of employing an additional person, giving you what? The marginal product. That is why we define the marginal product to be the addition to total product as a result of employing an additional unit of a variable factor. That is what? The labor. Now let's look at the graphical representation of the marginal product. Now the marginal product, this is how it behaves. Initially, the marginal product increases. Then it attains a maximum, it begins to fall, and then finally enters the negative zone. In my next video, I will explain why the marginal product attains a negative. It's as a result of what? Something. So I'm going to explain in my next video. But then that is the graphical representation of the marginal product. It increases, attains a maximum, falls, and then what? Enters the negative zone. Now let's see how to calculate for the marginal product. That is the mathematical representation of the marginal product. The marginal product is change in total product divided by the change in labor. Change in total product divided by the change in labor. Now the change in total product is also equal to, that is the TP1 minus TP0. Whilst the change in labor is L1 minus L0. Now let's define the variables we've put. The TP1 represents the current total product. The current total product. The TP0, it's the previous or the old total product. Then that of the L1, it's the current labor. Then L0, it's the previous or the old labor. So if we are to fix the variable into the main formula, that will be the marginal product is equal to the current total product minus the previous total product all over the current labor minus the previous labor. So that is the mathematical representation or the formula for calculating the marginal product. So we end our lesson for today. Remember to subscribe to the channel, you like, you share, you leave a comment. Thank you and have a great day.